Hello, welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today I am back from my travels with Friday Reads. So this week we did go on our anniversary trip to Washington, D.C., and I will share a couple comments about that in just a moment, but I'm going to try to stick to my format here. So first of all, TV shows that we've been watching this week. Um, yeah, the Great British Baking Show is just tootling along with one episode a week, and then I can't even remember what happened in the last one. I think what did they make? I don't even remember because that was a week ago. Then we watched The Watcher, and it was ridiculous, and I'm not recommending that show. I know it's been like number one on Netflix, and we watched it. It was just absurd. It was really a it had so many plot holes that really it was like a collection of holes held together by the whisper of a plot. And the actors in it, you've seen all these people in much better roles. I don't know, it seems like a phenomenon that if you bring too many good people together, something's always wrong with the movie, but anyway, it was just kind of absurd. And it was based on a true story. And the true story is, kind of weird in a kind of a Dateline or 60 Minutes, segment kind of level. But they just took it way, way, way over the top, which would have been entertaining if they had tied anything up at all, but they did not. All right, but still, we did sit there through 7 episodes and watch the whole thing. Then we started watching Derry Girls, we've only seen a few episodes, and it's very funny, and I'm liking it so far. So don't have much to say about that one yet, but so far so good. All right, so the big event of the week was that we went on our 30th anniversary trip to Washington, D.C., which was the place that we went when we got married. And then we've been back there a few different times. And I actually was there a lot, like in my teens and college age as well, because I lived in Northern Virginia during those years. So it's a kind of a familiar city to me, but I hadn't been there in quite a while. And so we had a really great trip. We saw tons of museums. We had a really great position of where our hotel was, that we didn't have to have a car for anything. We were able to walk and take the metro everywhere. It was really fun. And I did visit 3 bookstores during the trip. There was more that I would have liked to have seen, but I went to the ones that kind of fit into our general plans and our agenda, our foot and metro traffic kind of agenda. So the other ones were a little more farther out from where we were staying. But I think it's good to have things, for next time in mind. So I want to tell you about the 3 bookstores that I visited, and I'll put some information about them in the description in case you want to look them up, or if you have any opportunity to visit the city anytime soon. I did buy 2 books. I was extremely frugal about this not because I'm not really very frugal about book buying, but it was because of space issues, with my bags were super heavy and packed. So I kind of restricted myself to 2 books that I found at 2 different shops, that just things that I've been wanting that I haven't been able to find, that I wanted to see in person, and then I found them. And I will share them with you in a very soon. That didn't make sense. I will share them very soon in another video. But let me tell you about the stores. So first of all, we stopped at Bridge Street Books, and we actually went to this store twice because we happened to be passing it on our way back from dinner on another night. But we went to it on purpose the first time we went, because it was walking distance. It was about maybe 10 or 12-minute walk from our hotel. And Bridge Street Books is an independent bookstore, a new bookstore, not used, but new books. And it's in this little shotgun kind of, it's in Georgetown. So if you've ever been to Georgetown in DC, it's an old area, but they've, made everything into shops and restaurants and stuff. So it's kind of a shotgun style building. So it goes straight back, and then there's a second story, and everything's very narrow. And so all these bookstores were pretty narrow and had a lot of people in them, which is great. But I did not film anything in them. I took some pictures, but there was a lot of people everywhere, so I didn't want to get out, video and stuff. But anyway, so it goes straight back and then up, and all the fiction is mostly upstairs. And they had a really interesting collection. They did have, some of the new releases that are kind of the buzz, but they also have a pretty good, even though it was very tight, they did have interesting representation or interesting editions of books. Like I saw the book that I was reading during the trip that I'll talk about in a minute was Kindred, and they had this really beautiful hardcover edition of that I was jealous of. And so this was a very fun store to just browse and wind around, and they had used all the space. I mean, they had stuff on display all the way up to the top. And when I was looking around, I did see this one book that caught my eye that was really up high. So Stephen kindly brought it down for me, and I really almost bought this. And I never buy poetry. Most of the poetry I read are things I've already loved for years, and maybe I have them in an anthology or I will just look them up. But this book caught my eye, and I'm going to show it to you now. It was called I Dreamed I Was Emily Dickinson's Boyfriend. And then the author's name is getting away from me now, but I'll have it up here on the screen. And I just had to take a look at it, and it turned out it was really good. Like, the poems were they were funny, they were offbeat. I really was seriously tempted. I kind of have not buyer's regret, like didn't buy it regret rather than buyer's remorse about this book. But at this point, I saw it on our second time through the store, and I'd already bought a couple of books, so I was like, no, I gotta stop. Then on a different day, we walked to DuPont Circle, and I visited two bookstores. The first one was a used bookstore called Second Story Books, and this one, they had like carts out on, well, both of them had carts out on the sidewalk of like bargain books. And then inside it was again small and just packed tight with so many used books of all levels. So they had rare and collectibles, and then they had just secondhand ones that were more reasonably priced. And the fiction was way in the back, but they had a really huge nonfiction section. But then right up at the front, they had tons and tons of collectible, leather-bound, nice editions. And they had lots and lots of, I'm going to put some pictures up. They had a ton of those Franklin Library books. So I thought about Greg from Supposedly Fun and his beautiful collection of these books, because I think he might have passed out if he just happened to walk into the store, because they had so many of those, and they were in beautiful condition, all kinds of prices. And I don't know if I'll have to see if we have a picture of this, but I saw the most expensive edition of The Hobbit you can possibly imagine in this store as well. So, but that was just fun to mosey around in there. And I did not buy anything from this store because I have kind of a short list in my mind of things I'm trying to find secondhand, and they didn't happen to have any of them. And since I wasn't at home, I was not in the mode to just buy, a pile of things, because there's no way to get it back. So I just enjoyed looking, but I did not purchase. And then later on that same day, we went to a store that to me has always been called Kramer Books, but they've changed their name and their signage to Kramer's. And although they do have, when you go inside and you look at the merch, like t-shirts and stuff, they still have ones that say Kramer Books. And Afterwards was the name of the cafe. And it's still a book in a cafe. And I've gone to this store many times dating back into my teenage years when I'd come to DC with my family to go see a museum or something, and we had come over to this neighborhood. But so it's always been a kind of, again, another bookstore that's kind of compact. It's new books. It has a pretty good selection. It doesn't have a ton of like the new book display, but it does have a lot of, if you think of an author, they probably have at least one book by that author. So that's kind of like a little litmus test for me. Is I'll just think of a few kind of not super famous authors and see if they have anything by them. And so it did kind of pass that test, but I looked around and I was tempted to buy some merch, but I didn't do it. I did buy a book, which I will share soon in a different video because I'm trying to assemble some stuff together for a haul video that I'm waiting for some one or two things that are have been ordered or I'm about to order. But I did enjoy the kind of the nostalgia of going to that store once again. And we would have liked to eat at the cafe, but it really didn't have a lot of vegetarian offerings. So we took a pass on that and found another place instead. But Kramer's was fun to visit once again. There were some other stores, like I said, that I really wanted to visit, but they just didn't really fit in with the other things we had planned, and we didn't get to all the museums we had in mind either. So I have some ideas for the future. But that was a fun part of our trip. Now for this week in reading. So, when last we spoke, I was right at the very end of Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, and I really love this book. I This book will be definitely on my top 10 or 12 or whatever cheating number I come up with of the year. It was just exquisite, and I talked some about it last week about it. If somebody said, well, what is the story about? Well, on the surface, it's about the family of William Shakespeare and what it was like to live in the late 1500s, what it was like, or yeah, I think late 1500s. I don't think it had crossed into 1600 yet. I'll have to look at that. But what it was like to live at that time. But really, it's about grief. It's about um, grief in a family, like how it affects people differently, how it affects a marriage, how it affects siblings. It's about marriage. It's about love and marriage and relationships and when they don't work, when they do, what the sacrifices and compromises that people could make. It's about a really remarkable woman and um, her experiences of being a wife and mother, and it's just it's just kind of radiant. It's so good, even though it's really really sad, the actual subject matter, but it was just so good. So I really want to read The Marriage Portrait, but I'm a little scared because I've heard mostly really good reviews, but then I've heard a couple people say that they had certain problems with it. And I don't know what the problems are because I've avoided the videos where they go more into depth about the book. So some people have done either reviews with spoilers or kind of spoilers. And so because I feel like I want to read it, I haven't watched those, but then I'm kind of nervous because what if I also feel like that? So I want to read it, but I approach it with trepidation. So anyway, I finished Hamnet, and then on the trip, I read Kindred by Octavia Butler, and I chose this book because I really loved Parable of the Talents. I have not yet read the sequel to that, Parable of the No, I always do this. I read Parable of the Sower, but I have not read Parable of the Talents because I cannot find a good copy of it, or a good secondhand edition. I did see a beautiful box set of the two books together at Kramer Books, and I did not buy it because A, it was a heavy box set and I was on a trip, and B, I already have the first book. But Kindred was a science fiction novel, a time travel novel, and it was written in the 70s, and the contemporary part of the story is in the 70s, which now doesn't seem very contemporary. So that was kind of a little bit, if you just thought it was the current time period and you start reading, a couple of things that happen are a little bit off. But if you understand that the contemporary part is actually the mid 70s, then you're okay. So it is about Dana, who is a woman who lives in the 70s, and she is a black woman. Her husband, Kevin, is white, and he's about 10 years older than her. They are both writers, and they live in California. And at the beginning of the story, they have just bought their first house, and they're in their process of moving in and unpacking. All of a sudden, Dana starts feeling weird and dizzy, and in a split second, she suddenly is on the banks of a river, and she hears a child struggling in the river, and she just, on impulse, she goes in and she rescues him. She does mouth to mouth. She saves this kid, and as she kind of starts looking around at her surroundings, she realizes like what and where is this? Because everybody, there's the women in long dresses and the old-fashioned clothing, and everyone's looking at her in horror. But then she disappears again back to her own home. And when she reappears, her husband is freaking out because she had disappeared on one side of the room and reappeared on the other side, and she's all wet and muddy. So he right away, he doesn't doubt what has happened. She doesn't understand what happened. And she was only gone for a split second, but in the time where she went, she was gone for quite a number of minutes. So this time travel happens a total of 6 times in the book, and every time in the past, the time passes longer. When she comes back, only a short amount of time has passed. It might be a few minutes or a few days, depending on how long she was gone. But where she is going is to her own family's past on a plantation in Maryland. And she realizes pretty soon from looking at people and hearing names and voices that these are people from her own family history. And she realizes that every time she appears in the past, it's when this young white child, Rufus, is having some kind of a crisis that might endanger his life. And she appears and has to save him. And every time she goes back, he's getting older and going up through his life. And she gets to know the other people on the plantation, the people in Rufus's family, and the slaves that work there. So I don't want to give too much away, but she realizes that there's a certain purpose she has for the time travel and something she's supposed to do. But there are so many dangers because when she appears in the past as a Black woman, she's instantly perceived as a slave and treated as such. And no matter how hard she tries, everyone knows there's something off about her. She doesn't talk like the other Black people on the plantation. She's literate. She tries, but she really cannot be as deferential as they are. And so she gets into a lot of trouble over and over again. Plus, certain people know what her situation really is, and they have their own motivations for helping or not helping her. And it gets into also, well, no, I can't tell you that part because it'd be a spoiler. Never mind. So that's the premise. The premise is very interesting. The execution is pretty good. I did not like it as much as Parable of the Sower. I thought that the style was a little stiff in a few places, and there's one main character who he's just so inconsistent. It's just kind of aggravating, and it's kind of part of the plot that he's like that and why he's like that, but just his relationship with Dana sort of drained on me after a while. But I really did think it was fascinating as a premise, and I enjoyed reading it. All right. Then, so those are the 2 that I finished. Last night, when I just began Shrines of Gaiety by Kate Atkinson. I've been really eager to read this book because I love Kate Atkinson, and my daughter gave me this for my birthday earlier this month, but I was just in the midst of some other books. So finally it's time to read it. I only read the very beginning of it last night to see the setup. There's a woman named Nellie Koertge who has 6 children, and at the beginning of the story, she has just gotten out of jail, and they are celebrating, and we start to get her backstory of how she built her empire of nightclubs in London. And so that is what I'm reading about right now. If it is set in the 1920s, I think it's going to be excellent fun, and I'm looking forward to reading more of that today. All right, let me check my cheat sheet. Did I talk about the things I set out to do? Yes, I did. So that was my week. It was busy. It was fun. And now I'm going to get back to some regular stuff. So upcoming in my next couple videos, I'm going to be doing the October wrap-up and the November TBR, including my nonfiction November plans. and hopefully a haul video too coming up soon. As soon as I don't really have enough right now, but a couple more pieces that I have in mind, and then I will share those as well. So I hope that you also had a great week, and let me know if you have been to these bookstores or have read these books that I'm talking about this week, or what else is going on. And otherwise, have a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.